Anya, do you want me to go ahead and?
Yeah, you're gonna be it. We'll change. We should have changed it from Mala to Christina.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Good to see all of you who can make it here today. We're going to go ahead and Molly couldn't be here today, so I'm going to try to pitch hit with the help of my friends. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the land acknowledgement today. I'd like to acknowledge the many tribes and bands who call Oregon their ancestral territory and honor the ongoing relationship between the land, plants, animals, and people indigenous to this place we now call home. We recognize the continued sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribes who have ties to this place and the subsequent bands within those tribes, and thank them for continuing to teach us how we might all be here together. I'd like to acknowledge the many, oh, that's it, I think.
I guess I may have pasted it
no.
twice. Sorry about that.
Sorry, I started, I got carried away and started reading it again, sorry.
Well, it's
by the way, I think it's a really great acknowledgement if we do decide to continue it. I've heard now several, I was on a webinar the other day they were doing a webinar, Representative Tanya Sanchez, and I can't remember the woman's name right now, but she was the director of the National Indian Child Welfare Center. And the conversation was about the Indian Child Welfare Act. There's some efforts underway to try to dismantle it and the impact of it on tribes here in Oregon. And anyway, they did a beautiful land acknowledgement. So I've been trying to listen to, I should have asked somebody if I could have had it. So I'll see if I can get it. But anyway, I really like ours, just for the record.
I do too. And I think it's also, and it's also important that a member of this committee wrote it and let us share it with everyone. For those of you who are joining a little later, we had an earlier conversation before the meeting started about, I don't know if it's a new development, but it's new to me because that was the first time I heard about it, which was a couple of weeks ago at a tribal government to government meeting. It's a cluster for health and human services agencies. And it was shared by the director of the Legislative Commission on Indian Services that the commission strongly recommends not to use land acknowledgement until the tribal elders decide whether to use it or not, because it's offensive to some tribes. So anyway, so that was the conversation we had prior to the meeting. So back to you, Christina.
Well, so we're supposed, let's see, on our agenda, I think the star attraction on our agenda today is we're supposed to be talking about the JCP plan resubmissions really related to question 6. And I just want to say, I apologize. I have not gotten through. I see that Adrian's on here, who is part of my team. And I've had a lot of setbacks in the month of April, and I did not get through all of them. I started working on this actually this weekend. And I'm not trying to be a complainer because everyone who knows me well knows I'm technologically challenged, but I could not get my comments to go into the column where the comments are. And Adrian, I think you are reviewer number 3 on our team, and I can see, I didn't read your comments because I didn't want to be influenced. Not that you were trying to influence me, you were just more prompt than I was. And I couldn't, it wouldn't allow me to enter comments. So now what I'm doing is I've started my own table, Anya, with the columns that somebody can cut and paste in there, or maybe somebody can give me a lesson. I even had Tiffany, my assistant, try to help me, who is very techie. She was struggling. So I know that's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. But anyway, beyond that, I can't wait to get into the conversation about this, because as I was going through the guidance that we were given, that we all talked about at previous meetings, I found myself struggling with some of the guidance and how to make that work with what I was seeing. So anyway, that's my kickoff. I would love to hear from other members if they were able to actually get through reviewing all of the counties they were assigned, or if they're still in progress like I am, or kind of where we stand.
This is Sam. Unlike Christine, I didn't even start because I thought one of the emails said that and a follow-up email was going to come with links and so forth, and I don't ever remember receiving that email. So that's the thing. So that, like, for me, I haven't read it. I haven't started too, but I'll be more than happy to start. I think I must have missed an email or two.
Yeah, you may have. I hope I still have your correct email address. Tanisha, do you mind putting that smart sheet on the screen so we can see where we're at?
Yeah, I have a comment too about some of the bullets under the components, but I don't want to get ahead of that.
Okay, so what would be more helpful, to look at the spreadsheet or at the instructions at this time?
I
So we can do both. Or either.
I think we need to do both. Does anyone have a preference of the order? If we don't have a, did anyone else have a hard time putting comments in? So Sam, you're like me, you haven't gotten through it all, but Adrian, you were able to put comments in, so you didn't have any struggle with that.
No.
Okay. And then let's see, who else is on here?
So did Anya send the email? Like, who sent the email?
I sent a couple of emails, Sam.
Okay, I'll check for Anya then. Okay, thank you.
Sure. I need to go off screen just for a sec.
It might be helpful to go to the actual guidance, or I had a question about especially component number 1 that I wanted to kind of throw out to the group. And Adrian, since you've gotten through all of, it looks like you've gotten through all of them, I'd love to hear, I'm sure other people might have the same questions I had when they're going through this.
Tanisha, if you could be so kind to, it's in that folder that I will put together for the meeting. There should be the review document there. So maybe instead of sharing the spreadsheet for now.
Yeah, this 4-page.
Yeah, that show and tell that Christina is doing. That one.
Old school.
It's in
Old
the folder. I'm sorry, it's just only one person can have control of the meeting, which is fine, as it should be. Christina is facilitating, Tanisha is in charge of the technical side, which I'm so glad about.
Hey, Anya, I just found your email from March 30th. I put it in the wrong folder. I'm so sorry. I'll work on this
As you
today and
should
tomorrow.
be, as you should be.
I did receive it, but it went into the wrong folder. Darn, my bad. I'll do it today and tomorrow. Sorry.
It's okay, you know, I'm just messing with you. Yes, I know you will.
I do have to say, when I went through them, it's interesting because I read, obviously what the evaluation was for them, and I probably would be a harder evaluator, but I was trying to be a bit more generous. And so it's interesting because as I was reading, I'm like, okay, that's great that you provide us information, but literally when I read several of them, I'm thinking, I don't see your strategy. Yes, you're talking about what your demographics of the area are and some of the things that they called out. It was, they spelled out, going to these meetings, but having worked in DEI work for so long, you can converse about this, you can talk about this, that still doesn't lead to strategy. So to me, for future, I would really like to see more like, what are you going to do? Even if you have a few students that are in your community, what I know, and I went to Oregon State University, so I understand being in a smaller community, there was still discrimination. There were still things going on. So even if your trends don't show that they are, there's truancy or anything else, there are other issues. One is even of belonging. So I actually tried to extend this time around because I'm sure, they probably didn't have all the background that we were looking for, how we would like for them to demonstrate their strategy. Because of that, I tried to be a bit more gracious. But honestly, if I were to grade how I would grade, having worked in this, having been in smaller communities as a Black woman, I would actually grade many of the scores lower than I did. So I just wanted to highlight that. I really didn't see a lot of strategy behind this question.
Yeah, I really saw so I think an example, Adrian, I'm not disagreeing with you. There was a sentence in one of I want to identify which county it was, but there was a sentence I highlighted. I'm looking at it over here. I have it up. I'm using my personal laptop since I'm working from home, so I can have a second screen. So it says, the department, wait, let me look here. While the percentages and data from the 2020 Relative Rate Index are too small to be statistically significant, the department regularly reviews data to ensure that any trending in actual numbers can be identified. So that was a standalone statement. And one of my comments that I'm putting in my table that you'll be getting, Anya, and Adrian and the folks on my team, I put, it would be helpful to have an example of how this regular review of data has or would be done. For example, I just put a quote. If there are 3 BIPOC youth who identified as female in a girls' circle group, they were talking in this county a lot about using girls' circle, which I'm very familiar with and is a great group. But anyway, youth who identify, if there were 3 BIPOC youth who identified as female in a girls' circle group and all 3 failed to complete the group, that would be something we would dig into deeper to determine what the reasons were these youth failed to complete, and identify if there were or are barriers related to how we operate the group, define success, enforce requirements with participants, etc., that do not foster success for all youth, and then explore what adjustments can be made to provide greater equity and opportunity from this group. That to me would be a strategy. Like when I say, oh, we review the data, that's kind of a so what? So you review it, but how do you review it in a way that results in action, that results in outcomes where kids have an opportunity to be successful, BIPOC youth who haven't, for some reason, been successful in this group. So that's, I think, getting a little bit to what you said, Adrian, because I think, and I'm not trying to speak for my peers in the juvenile justice system, but I know that all the counties that I was assigned to are small counties, and they are very operationally focused because they don't have many layers in their organization, or it isn't even just layers, it's people to think about the big picture and how things interact and impact each other. So I know that I guess I'm feeling a little bit of empathy right now because my assistant director, who is in charge of operations and takes care of that day-to-day stuff, so that I can go off and do policy and strategize and work. We have a strategic business plan and work on the goals we've set out. I have that normally, but for the last 5 months, my assistant director, who takes care of all the operational stuff, has had to be out because of the serious health condition of her infant daughter. So I have gotten pulled into that world of operations in a way that I never have been really in the last 11 years. So I'm not trying to make excuses for them, but I'm agreeing with you, Adrian, that there's not a lot of connecting up. And I honestly believe that's because many of those departments, in my county, I'm required as a department to have a strategic business plan and identify what are we trying to achieve from a very fundamental level. And I don't think that that is universal across the 36 counties. And I'm not trying to sound, I really do not want to sound condescending or arrogant or bigger is better or urban or suburban is smarter. I don't want to come across that way at all, because I know these people are really trying to do good work, which the theme that came out to me as I was reading them is, I know there was some technical assistance provided, but going through this now is illuminating to me areas where a different, maybe a different strategy about the technical assistance might need to be employed. So Adrian, as you said, you've worked in DEI for a long time and have done a lot of work in this area. My colleagues, when I was reading through these plans, haven't. And they don't know what they don't know. And once again, I hope I'm not being offensive in how I'm saying this, but there's a different level of, okay, so what? How do you get behind this? So what? And I see a pretty massive gap here.
Yeah.
And I was going through looking at the names of the counties, and of the in our association, we refer to large counties as being 100,000, population of 100,000 or more. And the vast majority of the large counties are not on this list. There are a couple on this list, but it's much more about the smaller counties. So yeah, so what do you think, folks, when you hear me throwing these things out here?
If I can just chime in, one, what you said was not offensive at all. In fact, as you were talking, it just made me think of different approaches. To me, what it sounds like, and it's still good that they're doing it, it's a reactive approach. Like first these girls go through and then you figure out. It would be nice to have something that's proactive. And maybe this is where, if we're talking about technical assistance, because in my DEI work, and part of it is just me being a participant and educating people, is what I learned from the very beginning. I can educate and educate and educate, but that still doesn't lead to change. And so having that technical assistance for people who have not done this to say, all these meetings that you go to, great, but how does that lead to change? Because it might just be you taking up time and saying, oh, yes, I've been educated about all these things. But at the end of the day, when you look at the results, still they are the same issues. And so how can we teach them from their learning and to have a proactive approach to addressing this? So hopefully, maybe it's just one of the 3 girls that don't complete, if any of them don't complete, and they can figure out, okay, well, what else do we need to change and more? Because honestly, a lot of this is culture change. And also understanding in our state, which our state is not so diverse, so many things, especially in these counties, are operated in a very white structure, a white framework. So understanding how does that connect within our students of color or youth of color. And so I think there's probably a little bit more, not probably, there is more work we need to do with these counties so that they see, yeah, your strategy might be to go to all these conferences and learn about, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But again, that doesn't indicate leading to change. And so I was in Benton County, which I know is larger than some of these other counties, but and I was at Oregon State, but still, Oregon State did a better job with their students of color than even U of O at the time, because they were intentional. Part of making change in this area is making sure it's like indicating what is the real problem and having real numbers and having real consequences to actually not meeting those numbers. It was interesting. I watched a TED talk about this, and the woman, Janet, she talked about in business, if you don't meet your numbers, at the end of the day, you might lose your job. In DEI work, there's not sometimes consequences, not that we can provide consequences to these counties, but what is it that we can do to really say this is serious work? Because obviously with these students, they're not going to be set up for success if certain things don't change. So, and we also, the counties, if we don't provide that technical assistance won't necessarily be set up for success to make change. So what more can we do to help set them up for success that also lead to the success of our youth and students of color? That's what I have to say.
Yeah, great. I mean, wow, I was taking down copious notes. Those are some really important points, and you hit the nail on the head. It's culture change, and it's the comment you made about they've been operating in a white framework. Yeah, it's like the air we breathe, and we don't think about it because everything has been centered in whiteness and white supremacy. And when you say that to some folks, they get offended by that comment because they think that means I'm saying they as an individual are racist, but every part of our systems, I mean, we're doing a lot of multi system work in my county. And when we start unpacking things, it's like, wow, every one of our systems has that white framework. So I don't know, I'm just feeling like, wow, where do we even begin, folks? So that doesn't sound very positive. I do think these are people, what we, in my field, we try to be as strength-based as we can. And I do think that these are people that really, professionals that really want to do good work, but they don't know how to. So, and you're absolutely right, going to conferences and saying, check, I went to a conference and I heard speaker XYZ speak. That isn't going to be how we get there. So I'd love to hear other people's thoughts about what Adrienne said. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really, you've given me a lot to think about.
And can I add one more thing, and then I'll be quiet?
No.
And I actually see this as because I want to hear from everyone else. I actually see this as a positive thing because in order to make change, you have to identify the issue. So I actually don't see it even coming from a deficit. I see it as, here's the issue, then how can we work to help them meet that? And when I speak about diversity, equity, inclusion, I actually move away from even saying white supremacy and all that, because I don't want to shut people off before we actually get to the issue. I think ultimately maybe it may come to that, and we know that that's the system that we are operating in this country. But that's why I specifically intentionally just say white culture, because I'm not making a negative or positive statement about it. I'm just saying what is. So that, yeah, there we go. Okay, now I want to hear from others.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to.
It looked like Brian had his hand up, but he put it down, so I'm not sure if he still has something to say.
I can't see the screen. Oh, hey, Brian.
Hey, I was actually, it wasn't a hand raise. It was a hand clap.
Oh, okay.
I'm just appreciating that all the contributions that I've heard so far. And I'm here. I'm going to be eating my lunch, but I'm here listening. And Adrienne, appreciate your comments. Christina, yours as well, and all to come.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Go right ahead, Rafi.
I was just going to chime in and literally say that I don't think I have anything really eloquent to say, but just to kind of talk through the process I went through when I was filling out and scoring. So a couple challenges I ran into. I had another work training obligation. So I missed kind of like the pre-briefing in person at the April meeting. And then kind of like going through and figuring it out. It was pretty straightforward, but I found like sometimes when I've done similar activities like this, there's kind of like a blind review process. So there's no way to see what other people have scored before you go through and score it. So as much as I was telling myself to not be influenced, like I could already see other people's scores, including Sanji's. And so I was also not around for the initial review of what had been written previously. Was that a whole, like, did everybody see the initial reviews, or have we as a group really just been engaged around the resubmissions? Okay. anyway, I found that I also wanted to grade like more graciously. Like I wanted to offer lower scores than what I was seeing like Sanji assigned or other people assigned. And it was hard because I didn't have a basis for like how much growth had these responses had since I was coming in. And like what are we really looking for? So I think similarly, I love the comments that were made. I don't know if it was Adrian or Christina, just around like in the future, like how to take this as like just a learning, like what did we learn even in our grading process? And like, what are we really looking for from counties when they are submitting their answers? Because similarly, I just feel like I'm not a DEI expert, but I wasn't getting a lot of what I wanted to see out of what I would have ranked as like a 8 or a 9 level response. Anyway, completely agree with what has been said.
Yeah, I think your observation about really taking in what did we learn as a group, that can help us translate that to the counties, the juvenile departments, in terms of, hey, here are some things we need you to look at, reflect on at a different level. I don't know. I'm somebody who I learn by doing, observing. Everyone learns in different ways. But I do think that having to go through the process of thinking about this and resubmitting it, I think I saw some changes from the original round. I'm not saying we're there yet where we need to be, but I did see some improvement. So I'm trying to figure out how do we deliver this information in a way that they can digest and is helpful to them, so that they can think about how do we turn what we're saying here into actual actions and strategies. And that's the part that's I think is going to be the tough part. So I'd love to hear other people's thoughts. And Tabiti, I saw you put some comments in. I'm terrible. I'm always looking at the person on the screen and not looking at the other stuff. So when you put some comments in here about you said, I agree, I made this comment in a few of county boxes. What was the specific comment? I'm sorry. If I'd been paying attention, I wouldn't be bugging you with that. What were you agreeing with?
Oh, no, it's fine. I just about some of the plans were a little specious, right? How are we going to actualize this? Or we don't have and that's why I put the comment, we don't have a population that's extremely puts us in a position to address these issues. And so and so my question was, well, does that preclude the necessity of making sure that such a lens exists? And I say this because 20 years ago, when I moved out here, my wife was taking a position in McMinnville, and we went to have a meeting with the superintendent of schools, and the superintendent said, well, we don't really have a lot of students of color in general. And so if you want to push these efforts, you're free to, kind of organize around that. And, I just found that to be really the wrong-headed type of thinking, because we all are living in this society. And while it may not be immediately accessible, how you function along those lines, we have a saying here that we remind our colleagues, what we do for the underrepresented groups of students, et cetera, all ships rise in tide. And so it will impact positively, all of our students. And so, therefore, it's almost like saying just because you're in an all male environment, does that mean you don't need to think about issues of misogyny and sexism? Absolutely, that is not true. So therefore, that's the comment I wanted to make. I hope that clears it up. And so in a few of the boxes, There were some, I made that comment, but I could have said that for, you know, more than the 2 or 3 where I kind of, a couple that I said, it's okay, but where's the details? How's this gonna, you know, address this? So.
You know, that's great. And then your other comment about a lack of interest seemed to be a reduced interest in articulating a strategy to address these issues in the absence of youth of color. So there seemed to be a theme that came out like, well, we only had 5 youth of color in our entire county, and it was, nobody said it this way, but that was statistically insignificant. Therefore, we're not going to do anything to dig deeper into this. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you put here, we have to talk about how to address this, because this is, I mean, we had 23 counties that we ended up looking at here. This is a pretty big issue across the whole state. And this is where I think we need to think about our connections nationally and try to figure out what's in some of these rural areas where there are only, you know, a handful of young people of color in those communities. It's not okay to say, oh, okay, well, there's only 5 of you, so you don't, and no one's consciously saying that, but the reality is just kind of ignoring it as a system is problematic. And I don't have a great answer to this, because I've been fortunate to work in places where I have had resources that we could tap into to help. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say Clackamas is perfect. We're not by any stretch of the imagination. We do a lot of good stuff despite what you might hear in the media. I just try to stay in my little corner of the world at the juvenile department. But I think this is a big issue. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Tabiti, and, you know, Anya, Brian, folks, YDC staff, you know, there's a lot of connections with national organizations, whether that's the Annie Casey Foundation or contacts through the OJJDP. I don't recall reading specifically any publications or bulletins that have gone out about this specific issue, but there are a lot of rural areas in the United States, so we cannot be the only state that struggles with this. So I'm just kind of wondering, how do we tap into that knowledge base?
So, Christina, if I may, I know that several of the Eastern and Central Oregon counties actually participated in any Casey reform. And one of the areas that they received technical assistance was addressing racial nesting disparities within their population. I don't believe all counties participated in it, and I cannot remember from the top of my head which did and which did not. But I think there was a total of like 8, and I wish Molly was here, but she'll be back. I think she is actually with NE right now in Baltimore. That's why she couldn't be here. So there's that, and also as I'm listening to you all talk, and I agree with everything that's been said so far, but also what I'm mostly learning is the lessons that we're learning as an organization, as the council, because it does seem to me that there is a serious need for technical assistance to be offered. And I don't know, see, here's the thing, this first year of the biennium ends in less than 2 months. And guess what? It's time to plan for the next. I'm not kidding. No. So it almost feels to me that the lessons learned by, I don't want to say both sides, because it's not like we're on opposite sides of this thing, but I'm thinking the lessons are learned by us, the organizers, sort of the administrators, the but also in the field at the same time. So they're learning what it is that they don't have, what tools they don't have in their box, and what barriers they have identified in that planning process, as well as we're learning what barriers they may have and what barriers we have. Like the obvious one, Sanjay started the process, and now Sanjay is working for a different organization. So we have this, as an agency, we have a bit of a void here that we'll be filling, and the position is going to be hopefully advertised, if not this week, but then maybe within the next couple of weeks. And that will be one of the expectations of the position, to work with counties and tribes to provide that technical assistance around addressing disparities. So we will be offering that, and hopefully this process today that we're discussing will be helping us figure out how best to provide that assistance. And I'm sorry I'm rambling, but because I'm kind of thinking through it, and I am also a little bit the pragmatic part of me is thinking, like, we're not nearly done with the review process, and June is already approaching, and June is the YDC meeting, at which point this committee needs to make recommendations to the council. So I don't know, help me, smart people. Can we complete the review process before June? And once we do, what type of recommendations are we going to be making? Are they going to be for an individual county, how they can improve, say, County X? This is where we see you could improve certain things, and then we will target technical assistance to that particular issue. Or is it a more general kind of response? Well, we're seeing that you're having some difficulties, and we will be figuring out how to help you deal with those difficulties. So sorry. Anyway, so that's kind of what I'm hoping to hear recommendations from this group around.
Yeah, Anya, that's why when I was doing my show and tell earlier, and now Tanisha's got it up there for us. That was part of, as I was going through this, part of my question was the column that said recommendation. So I put on my chart that I had to make, since I couldn't get the smart thing to work for me. What does that say about my smartness? But anyway, are we supposed, so let me back up. I think there is a lot of value, even though there's only 3 people reviewing these for each county. Those are 3 people that are a new set of eyes on these plans from before. Before, it was Sanjay. I'm not criticizing that because we've incorporated her review, but it was only her observation. So my hope would be that we're going to give our comments and feedback to these counties that took the time to resubmit them, so that they can benefit. Yeah, I see you going, Brian. I thought that's what the process was. So I think that in and of itself is, I think, a big change for them. So they're going to hear some information in a different way. I think that that's powerful. But I was struggling with, what am I supposed to put in this recommendation box? Am I supposed to put on this form? The first page has the new categories on the right. Exceptional, satisfactory. Well, they're not new. The criteria is new. But are we supposed to be taking our points and then saying, I recommend this be considered satisfactory. I recommend this be considered rated as needs improvement. I'm not sure. Is it the vote of the 3 rules it? So process-wise, as I was doing it, I was getting confused about, okay, what's the actual end game process? So when you say, Anya, what are we recommending to the YDC? That's a big question mark to me. So that's one thing I think we need to ponder as a group. And then I think whatever we do, we need to come up with a next step. So if we say to folks, hey, thanks for resubmitting this, but you still need improvement, we have to have some sort of, okay, you want me to improve? I want to improve. Now, what do I do? We have to have something to support that quest for improvement. So those are just some of my initial thoughts, and I don't know, what do other people think about that? Is anyone else confused about the process? And Brian, you guys spent a lot of time in the last few meetings on the process. It just feels like when you get into the actual nitty gritty of looking at these plans, they become real in a very different way.
So I think the process, as it was designed at least, was to engage in individual reviews of resubmissions.
Mhm.
So there were technically 4 people assigned to each, because Sanji was the first person who she completed her reviews before she left. And then there was 3 committee members assigned to
Yes. Right.
the group, right? So in the comments, you could share your comments, literally your comments. So if,
Yeah.
and I think Adrian left a few, and Tiberi is leaving. So this basically why I'm giving, say, a score of 6, the reasoning for it. When the recommendations is, and how can we recommend improvements? Now, this is what not the tricky part, but this is important, where with an agency and the council can come in as, can we support you in following up on the recommendations we're making? Does it make sense? So it's just kind of like what we were learning, what their issues might be from their side, but also from our side, and how we can organize ourselves around supporting them and resolving that. Because I don't think it's fair to just say, County X, you don't know what you don't know, but we want you to go and figure it out on your own. Because we did talk about lack of capacity and understanding and knowledge, and potentially. But what does concern me a little bit, that's pragmatic, but we are in May now. So would it be possible to set like a midterm point for the committee to actually complete the reviews before June? And we have a conversation about it? Or we're setting our timeline as what's the first Monday in June is what, June 6th, I think? And complete reviews by that time and have conversation and develop recommendations for YDC, which will meet on June 9th, I think. So what do you think is doable? Because frankly, can we look at the smart sheets? I'll just show you how far away we are from our goal.
Yeah, well, but none of my stuff's in there, Anya.
I know.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people. Well, there are several bits that are missing as well. Several reviews.
Yeah, I think we have to identify what is our goal here. So are we going, we already had a long conversation a few months ago about this isn't going to be a okay, you didn't pass, you're not getting your JCP money. I'm just summarizing this for the sake of, I know it was much more diplomatic than that, but I think this has been a journey. So, you know, where are we trying to get to at this moment in time? Let's say June YDC meeting. Are we trying to have 23, and I'm being a little facetious here, 23 exceptional rated JCP plans resubmitted from these counties, or are we trying to give them information that's going to help them focus on the areas they need to focus on? And then, you know, and then that goes back to Adrian said earlier, it's like they aren't, they're not thinking about strategies. We have to have a strategy. So what's our strategy here?
Well, I think it's both, you know, because there are some, well, for one thing, there are several county plans that did receive a review by all 4 reviewers.
Yeah.
And some of them actually pretty well written, and we can say they've shown obvious improvement, and at least at this point, they don't seem to be needing additional technical assistance unless they ask for it. And yet there are potentially others that could use some help, just doing what Adrian pointed, like how to help them develop a plan around the they identify the need, and so what do we do about it? So that's the future, but it's not about approving or disapproving, or it's withholding funds or not. So it's helping with kind of corrective, I don't want to say action because that sounds punitive, but I don't know. But again, I keep saying that we're also learning. It's a great learning experience for the next process, which will start soon. So in the guidelines that we will develop and share with counties and tribes, we'll have to be very clear from the very beginning what it is that we mean by what we're asking them to do. So I don't know if I answered your question or I made it even more confusing. I see Tanisha is back. I don't know, Brian, would you help me out? What do you think? And meanwhile, Tanisha, if you don't mind putting that smart sheet on the screen, please, so we can see where we're at. Thank you.
I'm happy to weigh in, and you know, we're on a journey to some extent, all of us. So I think, and hearing your question, Christina, about do we want everybody to, well, you said something about be scored as an exceptional and then hooray. I think that's a long game.
I think it's a long game.
Right? We love to, and so I think we want to, as soon as possible, have everybody scored.
Yes.
Number one. And scored with grace or whatever I'm not like caught up in how harsh or how, I think we want to be constructive. So I think getting everyone scored, and I think that the second part of your question, Christina, to me is the place where we should, as the sort of second goal, be focused, and that is for those counties who are, I don't know what cutoff we want to determine. There's exceptional and satisfactory, and then there's sort of like needs improvement. For the needs improvement category and below, I think we want to give those folks honest feedback and help them, and I think Sanji used words like this, help them articulate a clear plan for improving this work in their county. And we'd like our new racial and ethnic disparities coordinator to come alongside them to help them articulate that. Now that at this point is a voluntary engagement, right? We're not gonna force, we're not gonna take this away or you must do. By statute, I think we're not in a place to say this or else. So I guess I I think it's important to, and I, Anya, you know the timelines better than I do around like when's the next plan, JCP plan due, but I'd love to see those sort of needs improvement and other scores sort of below that, working closely with our coordinator to take real action and to have a clear strategy. I think the accountability, this is the last thing I'll say, the accountability, and Adrian, you spoke to this and it's come up a few other times, is I think important. Now, this committee or some subgroup of this committee should maybe spend some time, and I don't know when that time is going to be found, but it would be certainly a really healthy conversation or in other spaces to talk about, well, what does accountability need to look like? Longer conversation than I think we could have time for today, but I think we should talk about it and see what that looks like. But again, near term, get them scored, find out, is the 23 now 15 or 19 or whatever, I don't know what the number is, of plans that we're like, oh, they're still in this kind of, and then let's work with providing some stronger guidance to have them get a strategy. That's my 2 cents. Christina, does that answer the question, or do others have comments or questions?
I think it's hard to wrap your head around it a bit, Brian. So I do think I appreciate your attempt to try to answer my question. I think hearing a long game helps, right? That's our long game. This isn't going to be a light switch that we can flip and just have people magically know and understand things that they haven't. I mean, when Adrian was talking about the strategies, right? Like, there are some counties, they literally don't have a strategic business plan or strategic plan for their juvenile department. And, the question about training for staff, there are some counties that do not have very big training budgets, and they don't bring in, like we bring in people to do trainings in my department. They don't do that. So I think, I'm not making excuses for them. I think we need to think about what's, it's sort of like individual youth responsivity. We're trying to figure out what's going to work with that individual kid when we're working with them, because it's not a one size fits all. I think that very much applies to this situation. So, is it a combination of your new racial and ethnic disparities coordinator really kind of doing an assessment with them? Does it sound familiar, right? Doing an assessment with them, identifying what do they need help with. I mean, the whole business about strategic planning, Anya, Brian, you and I, we've done, there's probably other people on here who have done those certificate programs with the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform. Every single one of those programs, they hold up their template they use, and they recommend for a SMART action plan, which is their way of tiptoeing into strategic planning, helping people in a very concrete way figure out what it, developing a smart goals, smart action plan, right? We have folks here that are awesome people. They're smart. They're just so down into the boots on the ground work every minute of the day, which God bless them. We want them helping. I mean, they're out there working with kids, and families trying to do their best. But so I guess what I'm saying is, I think it is, I agree what you said. Everyone needs to be scored, rated, the categories that are on this paper. That needs to happen. Your comment about we want to be constructive. want to give them things that make them really able to focus, very concrete. I was trying to do that in my comments with them. And then for the, I think you said the needs improvement, anybody who falls below a needs improvement or lower, they need to kind of get special attention, time with the new racial and ethnic disparities coordinator that you're going to bring on board. So those are pretty high level. I don't disagree with any of that. I just don't know what the timeline is. I don't think you have somebody hired yet. Yeah, so I think going back to what Anya asked us to do, Anya's like trying to figure out, you know, can we get these done? I know I can get I can't speak for everybody else. I know that I can have my things done in the next few days, and somebody can help me figure out how to put them into the unified document. But I don't know where everybody else is with that. And I do think this committee could come together at the beginning of June and say, oh, okay, you know, here's where we're at. We might have some that we're close on, you know, so like the one I was giving the example of, I think Sanji gave them an 8. I gave them a 7. And I don't know what Adrian gave them. But we could have some that when you average the scores, they kind of come out on the cusp of, oh, you're a 6.5. Does that mean you're satisfactory minus or your needs improvement plus? I mean, so I don't think we thought about, you know, when we go to average it, right? That could happen. So then what do we do? So those are some things that I think we need to think about. And then the messaging back to the counties when we give them this feedback. Yes, Tabidi, I think I see your hand up there.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. I think what we do is we follow the criteria that's outlined. So if their score is 6.5, then the appropriate response takes place. And if there's someone that has not yet been hired, when they arrive with this information and these mandates. This question around the empathy of people's goodwill, you know, I look at these, saw Ted talking to myself, oh, I'm being goodish, blah, blah. You know, that doesn't cut it. That's not that. I mean, I think that, you know, that's like me starting and making a comment and saying, yeah, I'm a good person. Like, now here's what I'm going to say, right? So let's clear that. I think that the whole point of creating these criteria is so that we can begin to move forward. And so if we don't begin to move forward now, then when, right? It's not a matter of, here is the statement to use. If you are committed and if you are a good person, then you'll take this and in that good spirit and as a good person with commitment, begin to engage in the conversation and move forward, attempting to do this work, knowing that we are good people and this committee is thoughtful and good. And so everyone's good. And so no one is offended and everyone stays committed to the criteria. How does that sound?
I think that sounds great, which is why it's good that we have this criteria, right? So, yeah, no, I don't disagree with you at all. And yes, we need to keep moving forward. It's just, obviously I have even had a lot of, I feel like I've spent a lot of time thinking about this and being part of this conversation. And then when I sat down to actually do it, I felt confused about a few things. So I'm just trying to clear up the confusion because I know we will have some confused people when we deliver this. And by the way, I have no problem being an ambassador. I frequently am with that group related to what this committee and what the YDC is doing in this area. And I've had many one-on-one conversations with folks who were like, hey, I don't understand why I didn't do well on this. And I've been real with folks. I mean, Molly's the longest serving juvenile director, and I'm about to become the second longest. So I've known a lot of these people for a while. Although we've had a lot of retirements, which is how I've moved up in my longevity ranking. So there are some of these folks I really don't know, thank you, COVID, because we haven't been meeting face to face. But I do think that Brian, you and Anya have been coming to our meetings. I mean, I think there will be opportunities to help explain this, and then for some one-on-one conversations too, because it could be a few months before you actually get your new person on board. And I really think the sooner once we get the feedback in, the sooner we give that to them, the folks that are impacted by this, the better. So what do other people think? Have we covered what you need, Anya? Oh, Anya, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I think we have a plan. So first of all, please, if you haven't completed your reviews, do so. If you have trouble entering your comments, and if I cannot be of help, the very talented Tanisha can be of help, right? Tanisha is super talented, and you can help us all with that. If you joined us later, like I think Rafi did, if you want, I will give you access to all the original submissions, if that helps. But you have your hand up. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just had a question regarding comments. So when I went through, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
When I initially went through, I just scored. I didn't take the time to really write out feedback and comments. Is that something we're going to be providing to counties? Should I go back and actually write down some written feedback and put comments in?
I think if your comments equal recommendation, then yes, by all means.
So if my comments are recommendations for ways they could improve in the future or be stronger.
Right, because the comments are usually internal for the committee to look at each other's comments and see a justification for scoring. At least that's what my envisioning was. And the recommendation is going out to the county how they can improve. But the reason I actually raised my hand is I hate to do that, but we're a little bit over time. It's 2:15 and we have a presentation and we have a guest. We have Robin Miller here, and she and Adrian were to talk to us about human trafficking. So could we let them do their presentation and then if needed, come back and conclude this discussion around the plan review? Would that be okay? Committee members. And it's my fault. I thought we will be done with this discussion by 2 o'clock. That's why I suggested that Adrian and Robin could have the floor from 2 until 2:30 or something. So, but let me just give you a little preview why I asked Adrian and she in turn asked Robin to come and talk to us, because under the new reauthorization of the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act, each state has to have a plan. And we, as a state designated agency, are responsible for that plan on how the state will be working with kids who are either victims of human trafficking or are suspected to be victims of human trafficking, and what are the special rules and procedures and policies and screening and alternative placements are in place for the state. So that's the preview. I apologize, my landscaping crew just happens to be outside and it's super noisy. So Christina, could you please take over for now?
Sure. Okay, so I'm sorry, I got us a little bit delayed with that conversation, but this is what you get when you find out as a meeting starting that you're facilitating. So Adrian, would you like to go ahead and introduce our guest and take it from here?
Yes, I sure can. And if I can share my screen, that would be great. It's not letting me share my screen now
Give me
since
1 second, see if I make you a co-host, if that allows you to do that.
Perfect. And so really, to me, this is, we'll present some things that's happening in our state that I think we all need to know about, but also we want to leave time for discussion and question. I think that's even sometimes even the more important part. And to me, it's, okay, now that we've presented this to you, what can our counties do? Like, what can we do in moving forward? And being that it's only 30 minutes, there's obviously this is a big issue. So we're tailoring what we are sharing because it's something that can actually be very detrimental, not only to our state, but also to youth. So with that, I would like to invite Robin Miller. She's not only a colleague, she's also just a great friend who has been in this fight for longer than I have. And so Robin, if you can introduce yourself to the team, that would be great.
Certainly. I was saying, my name is Robin Miller, but you've heard that now, I think 3 or 4 times in the last 2 minutes. I work for Janus Youth Programs. I work in Vancouver, Washington. However, I serve youth and young people in Multnomah, Clackamas, Washington counties, Marion County, Lane County, as far down south as they are. I serve youth specifically who have been impacted by the sex trade through commercial sexual exploitation. I case manage and provide advocacy. 12 to 25 is the demographic, the age demographic I support. I've been doing this work with this population for about 8 years. I also have a lived experience in the commercial sex industry, being exploited. But yeah, so I'm in your juvenile justice systems, working with juvenile justice, like probation and parole, everything around that. I've been to Oak Creek. I typically make a monthly trip down that way. I serve at Donald D. Long. Both I've had Washington County and Multnomah County kiddos in there. And then I work in Vancouver also. So Clark County Detention, which I do hear from. I have one young person who's been in all of those facilities, and Echo Glen, which is OYA in Washington, I guess. And Donald D. Long has the best food, is what I've been told. So there's that.
Yeah.
And was their favorite, not favorite spot, but one of the best of all of the ones.
Wonderful. Thank you, Robin. So, okay, I'm going to do my screen share if I can get this over. So just to first give you an overview of sex trafficking in our state, and we won't spend a whole bunch of time speaking as much about that, but between 2009 and 2013, Portland State University, there was Chris Carey who did research on just sex trafficking in the city of Portland. So it's not necessarily representative of the whole state, but it definitely shows we have a problem here in our backyard. So it was 469 cases that were unduplicated of sex trafficking happening in the city of Portland. Now, this was when youth actually got services. It's not when it started, because the individuals or the organizations that they received the information from was the DHS, as well as Sexual Assault Resource Center. And it does not take into consideration the Native American population, because they don't necessarily filter and factor through our organizations here, these two, that the information was done. And what they found is over 90%, I think it was 98% were girls. The average age was 15.5. The youngest was 8. The oldest was, I believe, 21 or 22. There's an overrepresentation. I think it's been a while since I looked at the statistics, but I believe it was, oh gosh, Robin, African-American girls. It's been a while. I'm not going to give the statistic because I like to give right statistics, so I'll send that to everyone, but it definitely still, with our state and the demographic of our youth, it definitely showed an overrepresentation of our youth of color that were in the system. So I just wanted to kind of give you that overview from its city of Portland, and it's a start to demonstrate that there's a problem, and it's actually still even larger than what they see because you can't capture everything. Again, these were only the individuals that got services. What about those individuals that didn't get services? Okay, and then, taking into consideration the homeless population, we already know that it's, unfortunately, I think throughout the United States, but even here in our own community, it's growing. It's not good. But when you have a youth that's out on the street, within 48 hours of a youth going out on the street, I believe it's 2 out of 3 will be basically swooped up into this industry of trafficking because of survival sex or, for shelter, for food, etc. Now, to me, if it's a youth that's a runaway or homeless, it's because they're most likely running from a problem. So there's already trauma or something and the abuse possibly even in the background. So kind of wanted to highlight that first to say, we have a problem, it's in our community. But now what Robin and I would really like to talk to you about is this initiative that is to decriminalize or even legalize prostitution in the state of Oregon. Okay, and it is, here I'll just, it's interesting because it's had different iterations. So now it's called Initiative Petition 51. But what we'll talk about is what is full decriminalization of prostitution, what the update is on the agenda of the Sex Workers Commission to decriminalize in the state of Oregon, why it's detrimental to those in the commercial sex industry, as well as why is it detrimental to Oregonians, and we will specifically call out why is it detrimental to our youth. And then the model that we would recommend, that will be a very short portion of this. And really, the call to action, like for what is our discussion? Now that we've shared this with you, you can see what is actually something that is happening, that these people are trying to propose this for our state. So what can we do, whether it's sharing this information with our counties? I know that we're talking about policy change or the things that we put in the policy to how can we help them understand that this is actually even happening? Because if this were to be passed, there will be more youth that are exploited, and I would imagine that our detention centers would see more of these youth coming in. So it does impact us. So just one, what is full decriminalization of prostitution? Pretty much nobody is criminal. So that means the buyer and the pimp. So the person that's exploiting the person would not be criminalized, nor would the buyer. And the victim in and of itself would not be criminalized. And that's something we actually don't want the victim to be decriminalized. And so there's other model where we have it where they are not criminalized, but the buyer and the pimps are. But basically in my language is we're opening up Pandora's box for people who want to exploit others. So that's full decriminalization. So the update, so now, as you said, you heard me say, the original, this group is being led by this person who calls himself a philanthropist and a purchaser of sex, Aaron Boonshoft, who is sponsoring this and trying to help and provide funding to have this be passed in our state. So originally they tried to go the legislative route, but they didn't make headway with that. And so it was an original initiative petition 42, which it was approved. We don't know why he ended up withdrawing it. So he withdrew it. And now they have quickly moved forward to have initiative 51, that what's happening now. So Robin and I are part of a cohort that are contesting this. I'm actually one of the petitioners. And so a letter has been written by attorneys and submitted to the Secretary of State to actually challenge the ballot title, because the ballot title does not equal what they're actually putting within the ballot, and it can skew a person from voting yes or no. So what they want to do is actually, instead of, now that the legislative route did not work out, they're actually trying to put it on our November 2022 ballot so that individual Oregonians vote for this yes or no. So that's what they're trying to do at this point. If the ballot moves forward, if the Secretary of State approves what they have, or even changing the title and says yes, what this group has to do is to get 112,020 actually signatures by July of 2022 to get it on the ballot. So that's where we'll be. We're not sure. We're still waiting to hear back. And in July, and then another time, the Oregon Sex Workers Commission, they actually held a public hearing, which basically only called for testimonies in favor of decriminalizing it in Oregon. Anyone that was opposing it, they did not invite to the table. In fact, Robin tried to say, I'm a person who has lived life experience. Can I share? And they knew her position was opposing them. They would not allow it. What they did, and she was in person, I was on Zoom, but what I was able to see in their live streaming is, one, they basically had individuals who are current sex workers, mainly representing youth, people of color, transgender, LGBTQIA, basically saying why they would be in favor of this. But then you looked at the audience, and the audience was pretty much white. I'm like, okay, so you're basically re-exploiting these individuals right now. And Robin can share her story, but what I've heard from individuals that have lived life experience is, if they were in the life at that time, something like this, they would say yes, because it would help them. They're like, please support this. But after being out of the life for like 10 years or more, where they actually see the manipulation and all the things that really went on, they're like, no, this is not a good thing. So to me, it was a re-exploitation of someone that's in the industry. What they want to do is to start with Oregon. They want Oregon to lead the way, like, you know, with the marijuana, and that's what they likened it to. It's like, Oregon is liberal. Let's lead the way with Oregon so that it can be actually a national agenda. So just to put that on there for you. Their arguments are, it would make it safe for sex workers, that it would destigmatize sex work, that it's just between two consenting adults. And they say full decriminalization has been a central issue in the fight for racial justice and women's rights, which I find appalling, but anyway, that's my comments. The argument is that it reduces sex trafficking and keeps vulnerable people safe. And they say it's equal opportunity for all, including transgender and women. So I wanted to give you what their arguments were before showing what our encounter. One, does not make it safer. We don't even need to look to the international countries, or the different countries that have actually legalized this. We can look in our own backyard and see Nevada. Nevada has about a 50-year experience in history of legalization, and it's only in 7 counties. It's actually not even in the full state. And what they basically say is it does not make it safer. In fact, there sometimes have been pimps that will have their women and girls be in a brothel as a punishment, because they know they can't leave. There is, when you're there until your pimp says you can come back out. And also, what has been shared from them is that rape has occurred in these brothels, and oftentimes it is not reported because that brothel doesn't want to be known as the place where rapes occur. So there are so many different things that it doesn't make it safer. It does not take away stigma. In all these countries, including Nevada, our own country, where it is, whether it's decriminalized or legal, people still look at it as this bad thing. So it doesn't take away the stigma of prostitution or at all. And it is not just between two consenting adults. What we don't see is that third invisible party. When a person is being exploited, they're there because they have a quota to make. In order to make that quota, they have to play a role. They have to act like they want to be there. So it appears that they are consenting, but they're not, because they have this quota to make. Because if they don't, whether it is punishment of violence or a punishment of you have to be in this corner for however long, or you're not getting food, etc., there is some kind of consequence if they do not bring it home. So
add something. And with the removal of a third party person, a trafficker, there's still, like, when you talk about two consenting adults, even if it is two people of age, what is why are they consenting to it? Is this because they have no other way to get their needs met, pay their bills, provide shelter for their children? Is this something that they've been experience in their family or what have you. So it's not just that third party. Like what kind of, is it really consent when you're going to be on the street? Is that a choice? Like, is it a real choice? I just wanted to throw that in there because not everybody has a third party, and youth experiencing homelessness today, and this impacts boys on the street. My experience working with youth who are experiencing homelessness, and it doesn't have anything to do with their sexuality. They are having to trade sex with, I will say, predominantly adult men, because men are 99% the buyers in this industry. So that's my 2 cents. I'll wait for my next slide. Sorry.
No, that's good. No, in fact, because that third party is what she said, it can be poverty, it can be homelessness. It doesn't necessarily have to be a person. So thank you for calling that out. Yes. Okay, so why detrimental to those in the commercial sex industry? Well, if it's passed, it means that no one would go to jail at all. And so those individuals that are stuck, they will actually, think about it, even right now, people can go to jail. We haven't even solved the problem. So basically we are opening up this door for those to say, oh, wow, now I can actually basically exploit another person's body, make money, and not be criminalized for it. Wonderful. And then that person that's being criminalized, and you have to keep in mind the different vulnerable populations, from even immigrant and refugee community to our youth, which we'll get at, someone in poverty. Well, then how can they escape if they are under it? It literally is not just, it's not a safe place to be, because if you try to leave, just like we know with domestic violence, the most dangerous time when a person is trying to leave that relationship, or is when the person is trying to leave that relationship. This is the same, because all of a sudden you are messing with my money. You are the person who's making money for me, and you want to leave. That's the most dangerous time. So it will allow for more exploitation of these vulnerable populations. It keeps people marginalized. Oh, that's all you can do. That's all you're known for. It will increase the demand. Oregon is already considered, we already have sex tourism because of our strip clubs with our Oregon Constitution, and basically nudity is artistic expression. That's why we have more strip clubs per capita than any state. So people already come here for sex tourism. This will just increase that demand, because our strip clubs would become brothels. That's just the next step, and they're already set up for it. It would increase the rates of violence, rape, and murder. Again, with it being criminal, it doesn't solve the problem. This would not solve the problem at all. It would actually hamper the ability of law enforcement to do more exploration, because if it's in a legal place, they can't enter. It's legal. So even if trafficking and exploitation was occurring, they can't go and investigate. So even with the opposite side saying that, oh, it would decrease sex trafficking, how? You can't even go in if it's happening. So how they're making that statement is beyond me, because they haven't backed it up. It doesn't provide opportunity. And I'm thinking, a couple of these things is, you're saying it's equal opportunity employment and it's women's rights and racial rights. So that's all you think that I'm good for? Like, that's the opportunity you want to provide for me? I'm making is it really a choice? I'm doing this because maybe I am a person that's on the street homeless, or maybe it's, you do have those generations. We did see in the statistics here in Portland that it was that generational, like it's within the family. So you'd actually even had families exploiting or allowing for their youth to be, or their children to be exploited. So that this is really not a black and white thing. It's very gray. It's multiple layers that we have to look at. And so, with the buyers, with this, it really opens it up the door for them to seek out people to abuse and to act out their fantasies. They're already doing that now with our criminal, just how it's being criminal here in Oregon. But when you look at the state of Nevada, these individuals, it's like 2/3 are married men, 2/3 have kids, and they don't want to act these fantasies out with their partner. So they'd rather go and purchase someone to act these fantasies out with. So basically there are men, and mainly that's what the statistics have demonstrated, that have chosen not to go out and purchase here in Oregon because, or even wherever it's criminal, because they know if they get caught, they will be penalized. So that's what's holding them back. If it were to become decriminalized, there are some men that would say, oh, it's decriminal now, so I can actually go out and act out my fantasy with this person. So basically, it would increase the rate of sex tourism in Oregon. Okay, getting to our youth. Why is it vulnerable to youth? Because they will target vulnerable communities, especially those in communities of color, at-risk youth, foster youth, immigrant and refugee youth we see in our systems. And if you think about youth, their brains aren't fully developed until 23, 25. So for them to make these decisions on top of our culture glamorizing the pimp life, they may say, oh, this is glamorous, let me get into it. And by the time they get into it, they're like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. And it's hard to climb out. It would increase the supply and demand. Also, this, if it were to become decriminal, it would normalize basically harming people's body from an early age. And it's demonstrated in the state of Nevada, because what they say, you may not actually even be a person that's in the life, in the industry, but they are #1 for domestic violence that leads to homicide, and #5 to domestic violence. And what they say is that even if you're a woman just walking down the street, you don't feel safe. So because it's just normalized in everyday life and culture in that state of Nevada, it's, people don't, they look away from it, and really they're embodying like, oh, it's okay to harm a body for some, even they look at it as, oh, it's just two consenting adults. They don't look beyond that. Hopefully I'm making sense. The online grooming and recruiting increases. Now, this is what people don't understand, and this is what I really wanted to get to, is if this were decriminalized in the state of Oregon, the strip clubs, which again will become brothels, could actually go and promote their opportunities to our youth. This is what's done in Nevada, and this is what has stuck with me, is that brothels in Nevada actually go into high schools and promote their opportunities to high school students for them to come and work in their strip clubs or their brothels. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't just taking one state's experience and saying, oh, this will happen in Oregon. I asked 2 district attorneys, I'm like, could that happen in the state of Oregon? And they said, because there's no precedence, we don't see why not. So if this were to be passed in our state, these brothels could go and promote this to our youth. That's detrimental to me. Okay. So, again, I've already mentioned why detrimental to Oregonians. We have our nudity is our artistic expression, mentioned the strip clubs. It would definitely take away the ability for law enforcement to investigate sex trafficking. They would not be able to identify victims of human trafficking. And really, prostitution is the gateway to sexual slavery. When you look at just even worldwide, it's over 43 million individuals that are in human trafficking. Yeah, where prostitution is legal, the illegal abounds. One thing that in the state of Nevada, I believe it was $5 million that they calculated that came in from the legal. No, it was $750 million that came in from the legal prostitution. It was $5 billion that came in from the illegal. So yeah, take that number. It will increase attack on our children's bodies and women's bodies. So I will turn it over to Robin. I'm looking at the time, it's 2:41.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, it's probably good you took it over sooner, because I keep feeling like I want to add to some of the things you have been saying. There's so much more conversation to bring into this, so nuanced. I thought I was taking the last slide, so
Oh, go ahead. Yes.
Speaking to some of the things, a lot of the strip clubs, they're already acting as not legal brothels, but they are acting as brothels. This stuff is happening. One thing that I think is interesting about the Pacific Northwest is that we have a high number of bikini baristas. I have thought, and I'm not sure, I still haven't found the law in Oregon, can a 16-year-old work at these baristas? They can work at coffee shops. I don't know what the law is around that yet. But this, this industry is tailored to, we're seeing culture promote it. you know, as this way to make it, way to be successful, to, you know, I talked to a class at a college earlier today, and I was talking about Cardi B, and I love her, but I also kind of know where she came from and how she, you know, she entered into the strip club as a young person. She came from a family that was experiencing poverty. She's an anomaly though, right? Like, she is not everybody who goes to the strip club is going to be Cardi B. Believe me, if I could have used the sex industry to come out like Cardi B, maybe I would have, right? I think that our kids are just being misinformed and misguided. Some of the things Adrian was talking about in the legal brothels, like in Germany, 1 million men buy sex every day. In those brothels, they have 4 panic buttons. They aren't allowed to have pillows in their rooms because of the, excuse me, because of the threat of harm and danger that this industry is like built on. The petition that we've been talking about is 67 pages. The the ballot was initially challenged based on it violated the single subject law for an Oregon ballot, because this ballot touches health reform, child custody laws, employment laws, all sorts of things that, you know, our Oregon Constitution protects. So I don't know if this will be, you know, it will be pulled again this time, but I do believe that, like what Adrian is talking about, is as far as it becoming a destination, it will be. I have never had a sex buyer ask me for identification to prove my age. And actually, there's a law in both Oregon and Washington that if a child is out there being exploited in the sex trade, and say they're 17 and they have a fake ID that says they're 27, that is not even a legal defense, right? For them to, they would still be violating the TVPA, which is Trafficking Victims Protection Act. I see kids in custody all the time. The youth I'm serving are victims of trafficking, but yet they're still sitting in custody for other crimes related to their prostitution. I see too many young Black men going to jail and prison, serving sentences, pleading to sentences for years. And this could have also been a generational cycle that they have been groomed to occupy. I don't see any of the men who are predominantly middle class and white going to jail. So, I mean, I do believe that, you know, traffickers should not just be free to pimp and pander, but there's no equity in what the responses that we've seen over the years. And, you know, so that's why I definitely do not support the decriminalization of pimps, sex buyers. And then we talked about brothel owning also, which would they would be our strip clubs. They could be Airbnbs that pop up in your neighborhoods, right? Like wherever there's a large group of men gathering, that's where prostitution increases. So if we had like a college basketball tournament, you know, you're going to see an increase of people coming to our state for that reason. But if we decriminalize this issue, then it will be like that every day, right? Like men will just be coming here. And it does impact disproportionately women, girls of color, LGBTQ plus 2I folks. This is my caseload. These are the people I love and the people I serve. It's very troubling doing this direct service and then trying to convince people of the harms. That's where I feel like I've got burnt out in the last probably 6 months when this whole initiative was showed up in our laps. I do not equate this to work. There's a woman, Rachel Moran, she's a survivor from Ireland, calls it paid rape. Not everybody, there are people in the sex trade who consent, who can give consent because they have agency and autonomy. They're the very few. I support them where they're at. I'm not dragging them out of the sex trade. But if you have that much agency to turn down a buyer because you feel unsafe, or you turn down a buyer because he smells or he is whatever, right? Like you have some agency and autonomy. Most people don't. You don't have that agency if you can't pay, if you have to pay your rent, or your family's going to be kicked out, or you have a pimp who's going to beat your behind because you have to get that money. So you're constantly putting yourself in danger. And no other job has the rates of death and harm to them as the systems of prostitution hold. like Adrian pointed out, like, why are we just, it's almost like we're sentencing people to this, where we don't address the problems, the systems, right, to make things different. It's just, it's not healthy. And I don't think it's right to keep, expecting people to be there. I said I was there because I wanted to be there. For 6 years, I denied having a trafficker. I was there because I went to jail all the time. I think we have done a little bit better. I know Multnomah County doesn't arrest victims. Typically, they do a lot of reverse, what are they called? Fire suppression missions is where they've been focusing more of their attention. I definitely support those, because guess what? Those buyers have money to get out of jail. And if they even went to jail, again, we're not taking buyers to jail. They are buying sex from children. Sometimes these children harm these buyers to the point of almost dying with firearms or weapons, and they go to jail and spend their child. But these men who still broke the law don't go anywhere but home, to their families, to their jobs, to their health insurance, to their family vacations. So that is why I'm so passionate about it. I think I've totally gone off and not on the slides. But moving on to what we do, what I support, I'm a staunch equality model supporter, and I value the people who are engaged in this sex trade by choice, force, whatever. The equality model removes decriminalization from that person. It provides strategies to exit if they want to exit. It provides harm reduction. It provides support, resources, counseling, they're everything, but it holds the accountability and the criminalization to the sex buyer, where if they didn't buy sex, mind you, there won't be nobody would be pimping out children, people wouldn't be bought and sold because of that. And then it also holds brothel keepers criminalized. I think that if you were in the sex trade by choice, you would be able to screen your buyers. Two consenting adults could make that work with technology and resources, because you could make that work. But when you remove this criminality to those people, you can't. I think the buyer should have to also screen who they're going to see, right? Let's again make it equitable. The Nordic model, equality model, equity model, again, that's the person in the sex trade is decriminalized. All other parties are kept criminalized. We can have an equality model, and we could have, I feel like we already somewhat run in a decrim manner, other than with the benefit fully to the buyer. And I think I've just lost the last thing I was gonna say. But the call to action for me would be for you to really take a look at this. I do know advocates who support a full decrim policy. I do know folks in the sex trade, they don't want this IP 51 because it's more legalization. They don't want the state to pimp them, right? And in fact, the state of Nevada, there are, I think, 2 or 3 survivors who are suing Nevada for violating the 13th Amendment. And so because of the brothels the state receives income from the brothels, and there are people trafficked that occupy the brothels. Not everybody that works in a brothel is there by choice either. Surprise. So yeah, make a statement if you can. Talk to your colleagues. Give people the opportunity to make their own decision. You want to provide both of these. Let them pick. But I think that most people, when you hear the risks that would come if full decrim was enacted, that common sense tells me that I would not want that. I would support an equality model.
So I know we don't have that much time left, but would love to hear from you all with this surfaced for you, how our committee can help be a part of educating people around the state, because I think that's one of the strategies of the opposing team is they want to kind of, they don't want people to know about this because one, it's not November 2022 is not an election year, so less people vote. So, one, that's in their favor. And if less people also know about this and less people know about the true impact, more people might actually vote for it. So for us, whether it moves forward in the November 2022, it may not move forward in the 2022, but this is bound to come up. It just may be a next year. So we need to educate as many people on what's happening, what this issue is, and what actually the deeper impacts it can make in our state, especially with our youth. So I'd love to hear from you all.
Adrian and Robin, thank you so much for that presentation. Have you been going around to particular types of groups that we might be able to, like, for example, in Clackamas, every county has a local public safety coordinating council with all the different people that are involved in public safety. Have you been going out doing those kinds of presentations, or who have you been talking to?
So mainly, and Robin, you chime in too, we've been talking to a lot of legislators because there have been some legislators that have supported this, and for them to hear from those who especially have lived life experience. There's the Northwest Survivor Alliance, and so they've taken the lead to talk with our legislators about this and why they would not be in support of it. But this is where, as far as going out to community, we're taking a grassroots actually approach to this. Right now, we've kind of halted on going out to groups because we want to hear what the Secretary of State says, because that will change our message. So you're really, for me, the first group that we are even sharing about the Initiative 51 now that they've changed that. But this is where we would need more help to say, can you open the door for us to share with others? So like, I didn't even know, I'm in Clackamas County, by the way. I didn't even know of these safety committees until you literally just said it right now. So it'd be like, how can you help us connect with all of them in all of our counties? That's the type of help that we would need. Robin, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think you said it. We're getting ready. I think we're like gearing up. We're waiting to see if this ballot is actually going to make it through, or if it's pulled. And we have some really strong national allies who have come in clutch with resources for us to get some of this moving. And I would also suggest, like, the World Without Exploitation. They have, if you go to the website, they have a Now and Next speakers series that they've been doing. They started like at the beginning of the pandemic. There are so many survivor leaders who have shared their experiences and considerations and things that you could get a lot more information. So sharing some of those resources out where you're hearing from lived experience, again, because our voice, like for me, I feel like advocates who are promoting this, as something that is, I mean, obviously I support the people too, but living life after this doesn't just, it's not like, oh, when you're done, you're out of the life. Now you just go on and you're happy. Like, right, this is a lifetime of trauma that carries into your relationships, your family, I can go on and on. We don't have enough time for that. But anywhere you can get us in front of an audience is what, I think that's where we have to do it. And empowering and like asking all of you to do the same. Might not be invited to parties in 2023, but like, for me, it's worth it. I'll keep talking about it. Forgo the party.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really sorry because there's something we've got to approve here, but really appreciate you coming today, Robin, and of course, Adrian, you're part of our group, but sharing this really important information. And I think we can be following up with you. I've got some ideas. Robin, you said you do some work in Clackamas County. There's some natural places where you could have, come and do a presentation and have an impact. And then, of course, Anya, Brian, and I, we're all involved with the Oregon Juvenile Directors Association. So I'll be checking to see what position we're going to be taking. In fact, so we've got a meeting coming up later this month. Sore subject with you, Anya, but I can mention it there. So
thank you.
But yeah, so thank you so much. And Anya, I know there's something you need approved related to Klamath. So
have a great day. Thank you.
Thank
Robin,
you.
Adrian, thank you so much.
Thank you, Robin.
Bye.
Thank you.
Sorry to cut you off, but what Christina was talking about, why I'm not too thrilled about the upcoming Juvenile Directors Association meeting, is because we are not going to be there, Brian and I. We will be in Washington, D.C., and they are meeting in Ashland or at
Medford,
Medford.
not quite the same.
Anyway, and speaking of that area of the state, the one thing that we need to at least, I don't know, to formally approve or at least consider, we got a request from Klamath County asking permission to use $10,000 out of their biennial JCP allocation to pass on to the tribal youth court, so that the tribal youth court can provide some assistance to the tribal youth for prevention type activities. $10,000 is slightly, like by just a few dollars more than 10% of their allocation, which requires your approval. If it's under 10% of the allocation, then it can be done administratively, but I'm fully in support of their proposal. And well, I shouldn't say incidentally, it's not an incident really, and it's not a coincidence. We did speak earlier with Klamath County and Klamath Tribe about there is a ongoing overrepresentation of in Klamath County of tribal youth in their detention facilities. And so that would help with that effort to reduce numbers of tribal kids being placed in detention. So I'm in full support of that request.
So Anya, do you need someone to make a motion?
I don't think you vote. It's just like a general consensus. If no offense, but I think it's the YDC that votes. But at one of the YDC meetings, decision was made to defer this type of decisions to the Juvenile Justice Committee. They don't like require full formal vote. So if you're in support, then I'll just convey to Klamath County that they can go ahead and enter into the MOU with the Klamath Tribe and divert those monies. And Lindsay had just very quickly, maybe if that's okay, to give you a very quick update on where we are with our compliance manual. Madam Chair, is that okay? I know we're a little behind time, but.
Well, last week, Anya and I met with Ryan Shantz, who, as you may or may not know, used to be Oregon's compliance monitor. We went with him and his colleagues, and they gave us some recommendations after reviewing the manual. So we've got some of those with suggestions on what we should change and add. So that'll be my focus because it's due in June. So I'm going to have to edit and send it in again to be reviewed. So hopefully we can get that taken care of and accepted.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Christina.
Yes, thank you, Lindsay. Well, Anya, is there anything else that you need to? I think we got through it. Okay. Well, I guess we can call it a meeting. Lot packed in today. Wow, Adrian, a lot to think about there. Wow. Thank you so much again for bringing that to us. So I guess we will, Anya, in terms of the next steps on getting the reviews in, I think it might be helpful because a lot of people have had to drop off now and some folks weren't able to join us. Maybe send out an email and putting a hard date.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
right.
All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good seeing you all again.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks, Rafi. Thanks, Christina.
Bye.